Marvel Studios has spent over a decade building up their incredible cinematic universe. But Avengers Endgame changed things in a major way. Not only did we get to see our heroes facing their biggest threat yet, we also saw the incorporation of the multiverse into Marvel movies. Peter Parker was very excited about it in the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, but you might be wondering what exactly a multiverse is, and if it has anything to do with the Spider-Verse Sony made a movie about. It turns out that all of these complicated concepts actually got their start on the pages of Marvel comic books. Marvel Studios created the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was an ambitious concept many studios have since tried to replicate. For example, we all know that the movies Iron Man and Captain America: The First Avenger take place in the same fictional reality. Even when Steve Rogers and Tony Stark weren't in the same scene or movie together, you knew they existed in the same universe. But it might surprise you to know that although Marvel Studios was at the forefront of this concept, there were other ways in which they lagged behind DC Comics. We also see this singular universe on the pages of Marvel comic books, and it has been this way since the early 1960s. Marvel comic legends Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and Jack Kirby wanted to create a universe where all of their characters could interact with one another, face common enemies, and be impacted by the same major events. Just like in the movies, this Marvel universe eventually gave rise to the superhero team we know as the Avengers. But, unlike the movie version, the original comic book Avengers were Ant-Man, the Wasp, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Iron Man. Although an entire universe gives rise to endless possibilities, it also creates a bit of a conundrum. Because everything that happens in the universe has the potential to impact other characters, comic book authors had to be cautious to a certain extent. But the idea of there being multiple universes changed the game completely. Author Michael Moorcock is credited with creating the phrase multiverse, but we'd seen versions of multiverses in comic books prior to this. In 1953, DC's Wonder Woman discovered a parallel universe much like her own in Wonder Woman number 59. There's also The Flash number 123, which involved a trip to Earth 2. Marvel Comics weren't the first to introduce the idea of a multiverse, but that doesn't mean they didn't utilize it extremely well. Artists Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko are praised with setting the groundwork for the multiverse as we know it today. Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige claims it was Ditko's artwork in particular that inspired people to create these different universes, similar to our own in some aspects, but wildly original in others. In the late 1970s, Marvel decided to take the idea of alternate universes to the next level and create the Marvel Multiverse as we know it today. This starts with the creation of our very own humble Earth 616. Up until this point, audiences had read about parallel dimensions wildly different from the Marvel Universe they were used to. But in 1977, they were introduced to the very first installment of Marvel's popular What If series. This series explores what would happen if the lives of popular characters played out differently than in the original comic books. These comics asked the questions, what if the Fantastic Four never got their superpowers? What if Professor X became the Juggernaut? And what if Peter Parker decided not to become a superhero after being bitten by a radioactive spider? The series was not only a huge hit with fans, it also helped set up ground rules for the primary Marvel Universe. These rules would be further explained in Marvel 2-in-1 in 1979, which revealed that time travel could alter the past by creating an alternate history. Instead of influencing the current past, it would create an entirely new one. The main Marvel Universe is known as Earth 616, which comes from Alan Moore's The Daredevils in 1983. It's also known as Earth Prime, and is considered the default when you hear the phrase Marvel Universe. However, This universe is just as real as all of the other many different universes in the Marvel Multiverse. For example, we know the Marvel Cinematic Universe and DC's Extended Universe both exist simultaneously. You might have your favorite, but they are both real, or as real as a fictional universe can be. Before we get into some of the other universes out there, let's take a closer look at the one closest to our own reality. In the early days of comic books, many heroes were virtuous, infallible beings who fought crime in fictional places. Marvel Comics stood out for challenging these superhero norms. Instead of giving us a perfect adult hero, they gave us a teenage Peter Parker, overcome with anxiety and worrying about how to balance being a superhero with getting to class on time. This really resonated with audiences. And so did having Marvel Comics take place in a setting shockingly similar to the real world. Not only did Peter Parker struggle to pay his bills, but he did so in New York City instead of a fictional place like Metropolis or Gotham. In a way, what makes Earth 616 stand out so much is how well it fits in. Obviously, things like superpowers and the cosmology of the universe are different from our own world, but there are a lot of similarities. The main Marvel universe has the same countries, the same movie stars and politicians, and the same historical events. It adds fictional countries like Wakanda and organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D., but overall the similarities between this world and our own are striking. The MCU may get its inspiration from comic books, but there are some major differences between the Marvel comic universe and the cinematic one. In the comics, the major players are Spider-Man, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, Thor, Hulk, the Fantastic Four, Captain America, and Nick Fury. The X-Men and Avengers are also hugely important, although their cast of characters is constantly changing. One of the most notable and pervasive villains in this world is Doctor Doom, and there's also Magneto, the Green Goblin, Red Skull, Loki, and many more. Different universes even have different ways superpowers are obtained. In this one, they come from the Celestials. Bionic implants, magic, genetic manipulation, or some sort of catalyst, like a huge dose of radiation. Although it's often called Earth 616 or Earth Prime, this universe is much more than just our humble planet. There are tons of alien species like the Kree and Skrulls, and non-human races like the Eternals and Deviants. There are also different dimensions which exist within the frame of this universe, including the Dark Force dimension and the Microverse, just like how the Quantum Realm and the Astral Plane exist within the main MCU universe. Both comic and cinematic universes also share a similar method of addressing how time passes. Professor Hulk did a great job breaking this down in Avengers Endgame, but basically, time can branch out and create alternate realities when major events take place. In Endgame, the Infinity Stones being removed from moments in time were catalysts for this. It's unknown how many hundreds, thousands, or millions of these realities exist. In Spider-Man Far From Home, we learned Nick Fury was trying to keep track of these, and in the comic books, there are other people and organizations who monitor them as well. Some, like the Captain Britain Corps, have good intentions, but others, like Kang the Conqueror, are less than benevolent. These different dimensions are incapable of existing on their own without their connection to Earth Prime, and some of them have had major roles in the comic books. For example, the Pocket Dimension Counter-Earth was used to keep many of our favorite heroes safe when Onslaught showed up in Heroes Reborn. There's also the Soul World, which exists inside the Soul Gem, that we've also seen in Avengers Infinity War. With the Secret Wars storyline, Marvel Comics tried to distance itself from the 616 designation of their main universe. Technically, it no longer has a numerical marker, but comic book characters have since used the designation 616. We've even seen Easter eggs of it in the MCU, from all the way back in Thor: The Dark World. So what's the significance of the number 616? There have been many theories concerning this over the years, and some of them are shockingly grim. In the book of Revelation of the New Testament, some sources claim the beast of Revelation is associated with the number 616. Most translations claim the number is 666, but in the oldest preserved manuscripts, it's actually 616 instead. According to Alan Moore, who first provided that particular number, there's actually no real significance, and it's just a random number. But while the main Marvel universe may not have a story behind its number, that doesn't mean nobody cares about it. In fact, there's a particular hero who's quite dedicated to protecting it, and he's been a major player in setting up the rules and ramifications of this fictional universe. Captain America is one of the most popular superheroes in the world, and he's been a major player in the MCU since the early days. But there's also a Captain Britain in the comic books, and on Earth 616, his real name is Brian Braddock. He was a scholar who found himself in mortal peril when he was presented with a tempting offer from Merlin and Roma. He could be saved, but in exchange, would need to pledge his life to become Britain's champion. Brian took the deal and the Amulet of Right, becoming Captain Britain. An important part of his duties soon became protecting the multiverse from those who'd harm it. It's a very difficult job, but Brian isn't alone. The Captain Britain Corps is a massive league of superheroes who all go by the name Captain Britain. They're all similar heroes, but they hail from different alternate realities. When the situation calls for it, they team up in order to keep the multiverse safe from harm. While Earth 616 is the main universe, it's far from the only one. There's also another major universe we've seen on the big screen, thanks to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Marvel Studios has the MCU, and Sony is working on putting together Sony's universe of Marvel characters. Although they essentially loaned the character of Peter Parker to Marvel Studios for a while, Sony does own the rights to Spider-Man and all associated characters. They've produced the standard Spider-Man story twice, once with the Spider-Man series starring Tobey Maguire, and again with the Amazing Spider-Man movies starring Andrew Garfield. But then, they decided to do something a little bit different. Not only did they give us a new character as Spider-Man, but it took place in a totally different universe than the standard 616 we're used to. While Peter Parker is an immensely popular figure, Miles Morales, who lives in Earth 1610, better known as the Ultimates universe, is not. In this universe, a boy named Miles Morales was bitten by a genetically enhanced spider, leaving him with superpowers. There was already Peter Parker working as Spider-Man, but he sadly perished in an epic battle with enemies like the Green Goblin, Sandman, and Electro. Miles was on his way to the scuffle, but showed up just moments too late to save Peter Parker. The young hero was overcome with guilt, and decided to carry on Peter's legacy by becoming the next Spider-Man. And he started out wearing a Spider-Man Halloween costume, just like he did in the movie Into the Spider-Verse. The movie also drew inspiration from the Spider-Verse story published in 2014. In the comics, we were introduced to Peter Parker from Earth 311. This Peter didn't have any superpowers, and instead served as an apprentice to Spy Master Nick Fury. A running joke involved Peter almost being bitten by spiders until something went awry at the last moment. Although he does eventually get bitten and becomes the Spider, it doesn't last long. He's taken out by the villain Morlun, who vows to destroy all versions of Spider-Man across the multiverse. In the movie Into the Spider-Verse, we got to see just a few of the different versions of Spider-Man from the comic books. There's the Earth 1610 version, who perishes at the beginning of the movie, and then an older Peter Parker from another time shows up to help Miles. In the movie, it's implied that this is the Tobey Maguire version of Spider-Man we saw in the 2002 movie. His storyline montage even features iconic moments like stopping a speeding train and the famous upside-down kiss in the rain. Then, there's Gwen Stacy, a character who is an incredibly important part of Peter's life in Earth 616. Most people consider Mary Jane to be Peter's one true love, but they forget that he was head over heels for Gwen. In the Marvel Universe, she perished when the Green Goblin threw her off a bridge. Peter tried to stop her fall with his webbing, but the velocity was so great her neck snapped from being stopped too suddenly. He felt greatly responsible for losing her, and mourning Gwen brought him closer with her best friend Mary Jane, who was the only person Peter felt truly understood his loss. But the Gwen Stacy of Earth 65 was the one who ended up being bitten by a radioactive spider and obtaining superpowers. Peter Parker was the victim of bullying, which led to him injecting himself with a serum that turned him into the Lizard and caused him to lose control of himself. As Spider-Woman, Gwen manages to stop him, but ends up claiming his life in the process. This causes her to become a pariah where society is concerned, and she also struggles to live with the guilt of what she's done. Just as there have been many Spider-Men, there have been quite a few Spider-Women besides Gwen, including Mary Jane and Jessica Drew. Then, there's the Spider-Man from Earth 90214, also known as the Noir Universe. This version of Spider-Man is also named Peter Parker, and his story shares some elements of Earth 616's version, including that he works as a reporter and that his Uncle Ben was killed. This Peter Parker lives during the Great Depression and is bitten by a spider while investigating some smuggled spider statues. As a result, he has fevered dreams of a spider god and awakens to find himself gifted with superpowers. This is a much darker and more brutal Spider-Man than the Marvel Universe version. Peter wages a war against the criminal underworld of New York City and becomes a fearsome vigilante. He seeks to avenge his Uncle Ben and take down the major crime lord Norman Osborn. Unlike the 616 version, this Spider-Man has no problem using lethal weapons and claiming lives if he feels it necessary. While most Peter Parkers learn, with great power comes great responsibility, this one learned, if there is too much power, then it is the responsibility of the people to take it away. In stark contrast to Spider-Man Noir, we have the spider character from Earth 8311, Peter Porker. This character actually started out as a spider, before being bitten by an anthropomorphic pig in an experiment which went terribly awry. Peter, the now former spider, takes on the last name Porker in memory of the pig scientist who delivered the fateful bite to him. He decides to use his newly found powers to fight crime as Spider-Ham and faces off against enemies including Dr. Doom and the Swinister Six. Then there's Penny Parker, who was created by My Chemical Romance singer Gerard Way. He's also responsible for the hit comic books and Netflix show The Umbrella Academy. Penny Parker is a 14-year-old girl who lives on Earth 14512. Her father pilots a powerful mech suit until he loses his life while in action. A radioactive spider was an essential part of the suit's CPU, so Penny allowed it to bite her to establish a psychic link and take her father's place. In the comic books, there are tons more versions of Spider-Man, including one known as the Superior Spider-Man. Although he may look like Peter Parker, he's actually Otto Octavius, better known as Dr. Octopus. After Peter passes away, Octavius takes over his body, claiming that he's going to be a better Spider-Man than he ever was. He's impacted by Peter's lingering memories and consciousness, which also leads him to become a better person than he was in his old body. There's also the Peter Parker from Earth 92100, who tried to get rid of his spider powers by taking a potion he concocted. Unfortunately, this potion made his problem worse by giving him 4 extra arms, making him known as the Six-Armed Spider-Man. While we may have seen Miles Morales on the big screen in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, many wonder if his character exists in the MCU. According to Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige, Miles does indeed exist in some form in this movie universe. Whether or not he'll ever make an appearance in a movie by Marvel Studios is a different question entirely, and the answer is quite complicated. Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man and all associated characters, which is why he wasn't a part of the MCU until the beginning of Phase 3. Spider-Man was purchased by Sony when things were looking bad for Marvel from a financial standpoint. But then Marvel had the chance to help Sony out. As part of the deal, when Sony bought the rights to Spider-Man, they agreed to make a new Spider-Man movie every few years. If they failed to do so, they'd lose the rights to the character, which would revert back to Marvel. This was to prevent Spider-Man from languishing away in development and never making it to the big screen. But Sony was struggling to make a great Spider-Man movie after the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were universally panned. So they struck up a deal with Marvel Studios, allowing them to use Spider-Man in the MCU for 5 movies. But it wouldn't be that simple for Marvel. The MCU version of Spider-Man, played by Tom Holland, was allowed to be in 5 movies created by Marvel Studios. 3 of them would be movies involving other heroes, and 2 of them would be standalone movies. This Peter Parker first showed up in Captain America: Civil War, then appeared in Avengers: Infinity War and Avengers: Endgame. Marvel Studios profited from these movies, but the Spider-Man standalone movies were different. For Spider-Man: Homecoming and Far From Home, Marvel Studios was allowed to extend their creative input to the projects. Essentially, they made these movies that Sony was able to distribute and keep the profits from. For the average audience member, this could be confusing, as the lines between who owns the rights to Spider-Man seem blurred. Marvel Studios also put in some pretty heavy hints about Miles Morales in the movie Homecoming. Community actor Donald Glover plays a character named Aaron Davis, who Spider-Man interrogates about some illegal weapons dealing. In the comic books and Into the Spider-Verse, Aaron Davis is a villain called the Prowler, and he's also the uncle of Miles Morales. In Homecoming, Aaron Davis confirms he does have a nephew who lives in New York City, and in a deleted scene, we heard Aaron refer to him as Miles on the phone. This confirms that there's a Miles Morales in the primary Marvel movie universe, but whether he'll ever show up on the big screen or have any powers remains to be seen. Although there are many Spider characters in the multiverse, both in the comics and in the movies, there are some other Marvel universes worth exploring. There are many other universes inhabited by Marvel movie characters, including one where the big screen versions of the X-Men live. In Earth 1000, mutants have been around since at least the time of the pyramids. They learned to hide their powers, lest they face persecution, but more and more of them grew dissatisfied with being forced to live in the shadows. Mutant Charles Xavier started the X-Men in order to maintain peace, while characters like Magneto had a different version of the future in mind. It's a story most fans are familiar with, and was the setting of the X-Men film franchise up until X-Men Days of Future Past. It takes us from X-Men First Class to X-Men Days of Future Past, and includes X-Men Origins Wolverine and The Wolverine. Another universe focused on the exploits of the X-Men is Earth 1298, better known as the Mutant X universe. This is a total reimagining of the standard Earth 616 universe, with pretty significant differences in how mutants are viewed and how their powers manifest. In Earth 616, the mutant gene is always present, but in Earth 1298, it only appears if there's a random gene mutation, which can occur at any age. Originally, the Mutant X universe was one where mutants were held in high regard instead of mostly treated with distrust. But this more idyllic setting wouldn't last long. There was a serious retcon with Mutant X number 15, which made it clear that the anti-mutant sentiment was stronger in this universe than on Earth Prime. There's also a Nick Fury in this universe, and he's dramatically different from the one in the MCU. While that character is generally considered to be a good guy who wants to keep people safe, this Nick Fury is determined to hunt them down. He heads up S.H.I.E.L.D., but in this universe it stands for Saviors of Humanity by Intervention in the Evolution of Lifeform Deviants. This group is dedicated to taking out mutants because they view them as a danger to society. That's just one of the many shocking departures from the Marvel characters you know and love. In this universe, Magneto is in control of the X-Men, and Aurora Monroe, who most of us know as Storm, is a vampire who goes by the name Bloodstorm. Not only can she control the weather, but she can turn into mist and control animals. She even keeps around Forge and Kitty Pryde in order to drink from them and sustain herself. Shockingly, she's not even the only well-known character who's a vampire in this universe. After he's grievously injured, Gambit is saved by Aurora, who turns him into a vampire as well. There's also a universe featuring our favourite superheroes as zombies. Earth 2149 is another universe that was once very similar to Earth 616, but with some notable differences. Captain America had gotten a few promotions and was known as Colonel America. One of those promotions was to President of the United States at one point, but he didn't serve an entire term. Something horrific happened to the universe, and it happened within moments. A version of the Sentry arrived from another universe, bringing along a fast-acting zombie virus. The Avengers were on hand, but instead of saving the day, they were all immediately infected, and those that weren't didn't survive. Heroes like the Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, Spider-Man and Iron Man were now superpowered zombies. Later, when Galactus showed up, the zombies even tried to devour him as well, just as they had consumed his messenger, the Silver Surfer. Although they weren't initially successful, some did manage to consume Galactus and gain his powers. As out of control crazy as that universe gets, it serves as a stark contrast to another more familiar universe, Earth 1218. This is the closest to our actual universe, since it's devoid of any superheroes or supernatural beings. The number 1218 is a reference to the birthday of editor Jordan D. White, who edited New Exiles number 3, where the designation was given. Our universe was once destroyed in an incursion, but it wasn't gone for good. In the Secret Wars storyline, our reality was eventually restored, thanks to the actions of Reed Richards. Not only do Marvel movies and comic books contain different realities, but so do the video games. Earth 1048 first showed up in Spider-Geddon number 0, and it's the setting for the Spider-Man game for PlayStation 4. In this reality, Peter Parker has been working as Spider-Man for 8 long years with the assistance of NYPD Captain Yuri Watanabe. The two work together to take down crime boss Wilson Fisk, better known as Kingpin. But just as he warned Spider-Man, taking him down meant another more insidious villain would emerge. Soon, New York is the target of Mr. Negative and his Legion of Demons. Although the game focuses on the exploits of Spider-Man, we do hear mentions of other heroes including the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has a designation too, and it's Earth 199999, according to the official handbook of the Marvel Universe A to Z, number 5. Many people consider it to only encompass the movies created by Marvel Studios, starting with the first Iron Man movie released in 2008. But it also includes a variety of short films known as the Marvel One-Shots. These are The Consultant, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer, Item 47, Agent Carter, and All Hail the King. There are also television series including Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Inhumans, and the Netflix streaming shows like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Defenders, and The Punisher. There's also Runaways, Marvel's Cloak and Dagger, and web series like WHIH Newsfront and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Slingshot. While we've gone into great detail about the complications with involving Spider-Man in the MCU, thanks to the rights to his character being owned by Sony, there were some other famous Marvel heroes who were banned from the MCU until quite recently. The Fantastic Four and the X-Men were owned by 21st Century Fox up until December 2017. This was when they were acquired by the Walt Disney Company, but it would take some time for the deal to go through. It wasn't until March 2019 when the last details were hashed out and Disney took possession of the characters. According to Disney CEO Bob Iger, they plan to expand the Marvel Cinematic Universe to include the Fantastic Four, Deadpool, the X-Men, and many of their associated characters. There have been many instances of heroes from various universes teaming up together, and these stories are generally extremely popular with fans. Earlier, we talked about the Spider-Verse. But let's look at another major crossover comic event known as Marvel's Superheroes Secret Wars, or more simply, Secret Wars. According to Marvel Comics editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, he was trying to think of the next big comic event to get people excited and to get them buying action figures. Both the words secret and war tested well with audiences. So that's what Marvel decided to go with for their series, which was published from 1984 to 1985. The original Secret Wars story involved a cosmic entity known as the Beyonder, abducting major Marvel characters and whisking them away to Battleworld for the ultimate showdown of good versus evil. We got to see heroes like Captain America, Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, Iron Man, She-Hulk, Thor, the Wasp, the Human Torch, Mr. Fantastic, and the Thing. There were also a number of the X-Men on hand, including Colossus, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Professor X, Rogue, Storm, and Wolverine. On the villain team, we had the Absorbing Man, Doctor Doom, Dr. Octopus, the Enchantress, Kang the Conqueror, Claw, and many more epic enemies. The series was a huge hit with fans, just as predicted. It spawned quite a few what-if stories, including one where the heroes were stranded on Battleworld after the event. And there's the 2015 Secret Wars miniseries, which had far-reaching implications for many Marvel universes. Many universes were destroyed, including the Ultimate Universe, Earth 1610 and Marvel 2099. Universes, plot points, and alternate versions of characters met for the first time in a shared environment, when the multiverse as we know it is destroyed. Different versions of the Earth collide, destroying each other and merging together into a single battle world facilitated by Doctor Doom, who rules over it. Eventually, Doctor Strange leads some surviving characters on an assault on Doctor Doom's fortress. Doom's power is ultimately transferred to Mr. Fantastic, who uses it to restore Earth 616 and sets about recreating the various universes back to the way they were before. When the Marvel Cinematic Universe first debuted, there was no evidence of a multiverse, but many comic book fans believed it was just a matter of time before it was incorporated. The movie Ant-Man introduced the concept of the quantum realm, which was later used to facilitate time travel in Avengers Endgame. Desperate to undo the decimation that occurred in Infinity War, our heroes traveled through time to collect the Infinity Stones from various places in MCU history. However, the Ancient One warned Bruce Banner that removing the stones would create alternate realities. Left with no choice, our heroes took the stones, but later returned them to the proper places through time. It remains to be seen just how the multiverse will be incorporated into the MCU, and whether or not it'll be a strategically and sparingly used plot point or a core component of future films. Far From Home will be the last movie in Marvel's Phase 3. Marvel has been tight-lipped about what to expect from Phase 4, but now that the multiverse is in the mix, it could be pretty much anything. Now that you've learned about the history of the Marvel multiverse, what are your predictions for Marvel's Phase 4 and beyond? Share your predictions with us in the comments section below, and then click on the subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.